Here we are.
What?
We are live.
We're live.
I am Amy.
And I am Derrick, and I'm having drinks with Amy. How you doing, Amy?
Good. I'm good. What are you drinking?
I am having vodka and tonic, and I'm going to be completely honest and say that this is not my first one. So, because while it is 7 o'clock where you are, it is 10 o'clock where I am. And, you know, sometimes I can't hold off on the drinks with Amy until I'm having drinks with Amy.
Yeah.
So
the reality of being on posts.
Yeah, let's just be real here. There's some pre-gaming that happens on these shows.
I love it.
How about you? What are you drinking?
I am disobeying my acupuncturist's orders by drinking whiskey ginger.
So what in particular did your acupuncturist say that you weren't supposed to have?
Sugar.
Oh, so not whiskey.
And all things that turn into sugar in your body.
Truth.
So I'm having a cocktail instead of dessert.
I think that's fine.
Instead of both.
I think that's a fairly admirable sacrifice. Like I think you
yeah. The recommendation was to drink red wine or gin and tonic. And for a girl who usually drinks rum and pineapple juice or whiskey and ginger ale, gin and tonic's just not gonna cut it.
No.
He was like, how about you eat bitter foods? I was like,
no thanks, I'm good.
I was like, no.
Yeah, and the problem with vodka tonic is that like vodka doesn't taste like anything, so I'm really just like
hairspray.
Great.
Like alcohol.
So I'm having hairspray and tonic. So thank you for that. I'm enjoying my hairspray and tonic.
I was in way too many dance competitions and recitals and got way too much hairspray all over.
Not an experience I've had.
At competitions, we'd have like an assembly line of hair and makeup. So there was everybody did their own foundation, and then there was an eyeshadow person, there was an eyeliner person, there was a blush person, there was a lipstick person, and then everybody did their own mascara. And there was a hair person. There was like the person that did the actual style, and then there was the person who just hairsprayed the people once the hairstyle was done.
And was it like so what I'm imagining now is like
there were like 25 of us, and we all had to look identical.
I'm imagining like an orchard sprayer, like going across this row of seats, like spraying everyone's hair. Was it anything like that? Please say yes.
A little bit, yeah. Okay. It was the Aquanet giant.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and you had to spray your face once your hair was done, so that your face didn't move.
Okay.
You know, and people are like,
These are experiences I have not had.
Yeah. Because you are?
I'm a man.
Yeah.
And also didn't do a whole lot of theater.
Well,
I did very little theater, and when I did, it was just like enough makeup to make sure that my features weren't washed out. So
yeah, and generally I would say, you know, they don't put as much hairspray on men.
Truth, especially very, very short-haired men, and I have like this has basically been my look for a while. So the adjustments of facial hair, but other than that, this has more or less been like
your hairstyle.
Like people who like see pictures of me now like don't have trouble recognizing me. They're like, oh, basically that's Derrick. Face is a little fatter. Other than that, it's I don't know.
So, but it's interesting that this hairspray story is coming up because tonight we're talking about privilege.
We are talking about privilege.
And the reality of being male, a cisgendered male.
A cisgendered male. A straight cisgendered male.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is you're not subjected to as much hairspray.
Truth. That is a part of my privilege. Like, and I own that. I own that. That is part of my privilege. I do not have to deal with hairspray to the extent that my sisters who are, well, just, just sisters and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel bad. Like like this is solidarity. Like that's what I'm feeling for you right now. Solidarity. So how do we okay, so like I have my levels of privilege, and we're definitely going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. So part of it is like, and I think part of why we both wanted to talk about this is like, people get super defensive when you start bringing up issues of privilege. Like when you start identifying other people's areas of privilege, people get really kind of like people shut down, like hardcore shut down.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of there's a rejection of one's own privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not special.
Right.
Like, well, being special is different than being privileged or having privilege. And then there's also this thing of like, somehow, like white privilege. Mm-hmm. Somehow it's almost like somehow like admitting that you have white privilege equates you with being a racist.
Right. Those
are different in my mind.
Not exactly what that means. Yeah. I mean, like, so having male privilege doesn't necessarily make you sexist, and having straight privilege doesn't necessarily make you a homophobe.
Right.
But, I mean, you do have to recognize that there are certain advantages you get in culture by pieces of your identity. And, like, the best thing you can do is to own that and at least start with the very basic awareness of it. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When because I think this happens for all of us at various points. Yes, go ahead, take a drink while I'm asking. Let me just kind of start with the one that I feel like gets thrown around a lot. When did you become aware of white privilege as a thing from which you benefit? I mean, do you feel like that is something that has been, I mean, because like the identification of race is completely different than the identification of privilege.
Right.
So like, when did you become aware of the fact of like white privilege is something from which you benefit? I mean, I'm that's asking you to look for like the moment that the light bulb came on.
Yeah, no. I remember pretty early, like first, second grade.
Oh, wow.
I remember being in church, mm-hmm. and the way that there was some grumbling about how the neighborhood around the church was being taken over by non-English speaking, primarily Mexican immigrants.
Okay.
And that there were a lot of assumptions that people were making about those people, mm-hmm. because of the way that they looked.
Yeah.
And that just was so weird to me. At the time. I was like, why?
Yeah.
Why does that matter? And why can't we have a Spanish service?
Yeah.
And worship service. And why, like, and so, you know, as I grew up and the neighborhood continued to change, the congregation didn't open its doors. In fact, the doors became more locked. And there was some thefts of, like, there were some break-ins at the church, and it was always attributed to, like, the hoodlum, brown-skinned kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was never a thought that it could be a white person doing that.
Yeah.
And another one was, I think it was in, like, first grade that I began to notice that there were kids in my class who had a different skin color than me.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this guy who I think I've talked about making fun of me, his last name was Quinones.
Okay.
And that was kind of a name I'd never heard before.
Okay.
I was used to Smith and Harris and, like Miller and whatnot. And Quinones, interesting.
Yeah.
And then he happened to be a brown-skinned person. And I was like, that's interesting. And then this other kid moved to our school about that first, second grade. And there was he was biracial. And so I just remember thinking, wow, he looks really different than everybody else. Mm. And I remember thinking, I wonder if that's weird to him.
Yeah.
Like, so I remember noticing difference very early. It wasn't an issue for me. And so when I heard church people talking about and demonizing our Mexican neighbors, I was like, really? Because I'm in Sunday school and I'm pretty sure that's not what I'm learning about.
We do that whole, like, red and yellow, black and white, they're precious in His sight thing. Yeah, didn't we do that?
Yeah. I'm like singing, he's got the whole world in his hands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I heard people around me saying, like, well, only if you're white, basically.
Yeah.
That just, like, it made me really sad as a kid because I didn't have any power.
Yeah.
And it just felt really arbitrary.
Yeah.
Honestly. And then, as I got older, it was like, at a certain point, I just started to notice how few people of color there were. Because I was in Kansas.
Yeah.
I was in a, like, upper middle class suburb of Kansas City.
Okay.
The suburb, like, the county itself was upper middle class with, like, pockets of middle class. Mm-hmm. And so I was always kind of on the lower end of the economic spectrum. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I became very aware of that very quickly. And it became even more apparent once I got into middle school, because the elementary schools combined into the middle school. And everybody in my elementary school was kind of in the same economic status. Mm-hmm. And then we got to middle school and it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
We were definitely the poor kids. Yeah. And we weren't poor.
Right.
Like, relatively. Because the other thing about the church I grew up in is that it was in a poorer, it was in an older, sort of poorer neighborhood in Kansas City, Kansas. And so I was very aware of sort of the economic privilege. Like, the houses were smaller and kind of run down, and the streets didn't have curbs or sidewalks, different things like that. And so I noticed that also.
Yeah.
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 And then I think my next privilege awareness was about age. Because so in the Disciples of Christ, in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, you are baptized it's believer's baptism. So you're baptized once you know what that means and can choose it for yourself.
Okay.
And it's a baptism by immersion, so you get dunked in the pool, in the baptismal, and it's at that point that you become a full-fledged member of the church, of the congregation, with a vote in congregational meetings and all of that. So I think I was 8 when I was baptized, and I was super jazzed about going to my first congregational meeting and telling them what I thought about everything.
Mm-hmm. I can kind of imagine that.
Yeah, right? So there's like little Amy, and I'm like, I have opinions. Shocker. But yeah, so I was excited because I got to take communion for the first time, and I got to go to this congregational meeting, and they were talking about Sunday school. And I was like, oh, I go to Sunday school. I have ideas.
Yeah.
And they like couldn't figure out what to do about something. And I raised my hand and I was like, I have an idea. And they were like, okay. And I told them my idea. And of course, I thought it was brilliant.
Of course.
And the response was, why aren't you in the nursery with the other kids? And I was like, okay. And I left. Because I was like, this is a no-win situation for me.
Right.
And the only reason why they weren't listening to me was because I was a kid.
Yep.
And I was like, my polity tells me that I am a member and you need to listen to me. My voice means the same as everyone else's. But it didn't.
Now, at 8, did you throw out the word polity? Because that would be super impressive.
I don't think I knew that word yet.
Okay.
But that was the sentiment that I had, was like, I just learned in my membership class.
Yeah.
Membership means you get a vote and you have a voice.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because I was a kid. And I was like, remember that Sunday school thing about like, I'm pretty sure Jesus like was cool to kids.
Yeah. The gospel writers made a point of like making sure people knew that.
Yeah. So I kind of was like, okay. And that was when I really, then that gave rise to my rage against hypocrisy. I mean, I think it took a couple years after that, but definitely by the time I was like 12, I was like, practice what you preach, grr. And, it was 4 years later and no one was listening to me.
Now I'm imagining little Amy filled with righteous indignation.
Yes, with braces. Yep.
That's great.
Yep. And, so, I mean, and meanwhile, like on Youth Sunday, anything goes. And like, I think I preached my first sermon, I think I was 14.
Okay.
No one else wanted to preach on Youth Sunday.
Yeah.
I was like, I could talk for 10 minutes. Sure. And I'm pretty sure I preached on Ecclesiastes.
Wow.
Like I had this like angst and like just this sort
adults don't preach on Ecclesiastes.
I did. I totally did. And I was like, just, it was my anger at the institution and my way of calling people to accountability through this lament. Yeah, I was an intense kid.
It sounds like.
Yes. I think the word they used was sensitive. She's sensitive. My mom's like, I know, it's awesome.
Good for her.
Thank goodness. Yeah, seriously. I was, yeah. I mean, I had the privilege of a mother who worked from home. It's funny because when I was home in Kansas City last weekend, there was an afternoon that just my nuclear family, my mom, my dad, and my 2 sisters went out to lunch together. And then, this is going to sound really privileged, we came back to my parents' house and swam in the pool. But we were like hanging out in the pool, just the 5 of us. And my younger sister, we were throwing a ball. like a, one of those little squishy pool balls.
Yeah.
We were just like playing catch and throwing it around and seeing how many times we could catch it and throw it without it dropping and whatever. And so my mom throws it and it accidentally hits my sister in the head. Like, it doesn't hurt or anything, but
sure, yeah.
for her, it triggered the memory of the time, and I'm so sorry, everybody, for sharing this, but it triggered the memory for her of the time when my mom got mad at me and grabbed a hairbrush and threw it across the room, and it just happened to hit my sister. Like, total accident. I did something. My mom was furious at me. I remember it was this little pink plastic hairbrush, but like solid plastic, like heavy.
Yeah.
And she just and threw it across the room, and it all of a sudden you hear in the corner, and it's my poor sister who's just been beamed on the head. And my mom joked, she was like, of course, you don't remember all of the times that I didn't hit you in the head with a hairbrush. You remember the one time that I did on accident. And then Melanie's like, yeah, remember that one time that you were late to pick me up and I had to stay after with all the smelly kids? And my mom's like, yeah, and you don't remember all the times that I was there every single day waiting.
This became a very triggering event. Wow.
Waiting for you to get in the car. I was like, yeah, remember that time that I had to walk home in the rain because you thought that it was early release and, So, like, there's this cascade of, like, the 3 times between the 3 of us that my sisters and I can remember that my mom wasn't there.
The 3 times that your mom wasn't, like, an exemplary parent.
Yeah. And, of course, we're all, like, pushing 30, and we still remember these things immediately, and she still feels guilty about it.
Of course she does.
It's just, like, hilarity. But really, I had the privilege of a parent who was around a lot, and she was on the PTA. She was our Girl Scout leader. My dad was like the coach of everything we ever played. Like, he learned to play soccer and he learned to play tennis, and like he learned, like, I remember him reading the rule book. Like, I wanted to play volleyball, and so he like signed us up and signed up as the coach through the rec center, and I saw him reading the volleyball rule book. And it just blew my mind that my dad didn't already know how to play volleyball, but he was coaching it.
Yeah.
And he was like studying the rules before our first practice.
That's yeah. That's often how things work.
I was like, but you're a dad. You know what? You know all the sports.
Yeah. That's what dads do.
You know all the rules to all the sports. So, I had 2 very involved parents, and being a sensitive kid, like in 1st grade, at one point, my mom got a call from my teacher saying, I think you need to take Amy to the doctor. I'm pretty sure she has a bladder problem. She asks to go to the bathroom a lot. And luckily, my mom had the presence of mind to ask me about it. And so I got home from school, and she asked me, she said, when you go to the bathroom, do you always go to the bathroom? I was like, no. She's like, well, what do you do? I'm like, I go for a walk, or I go get a drink, or I look in other classrooms. I'm like, sometimes I go to the bathroom. If I have to go to the bathroom, I'll go to the bathroom.
Sure.
Well, what do you do? Like, why? And I'm like, well, to get away from Steve and Kyle. And, not only was I the sensitive kid, but I was also the kid who got along with everybody and didn't cause trouble.
Yeah.
I was the rule follower. So they always sat me next to
the bad kids.
The bad kids.
Yeah.
Always picked on me because I was always the shortest. My last name was Shoemaker.
And that was something that they felt like was worth picking fun on.
They called me Amy Shoetaker and accused me of stealing their shoes.
Right.
Now,
Hey.
for a rule follower, that's like the worst thing you can do to a person is accuse them of theft.
Yeah.
Accuse them of something illegal. So anyway, my mom got to the bottom of it and figured out, and I moved tables, and it was better after that. But you know, I was relentlessly bullied in school because it bothered me and it affected me, and somehow gratification that was gotten out of that by other people. And so you know, it was like I learned to navigate privilege very early because I was the shortest, and apparently that was a disadvantage. My last name was Shoemaker, and apparently that's not cool.
No.
You know, so, and then eventually in school, I became aware of the fact that I didn't get the cool new sneakers and the, you know, if I wanted a no fear t-shirt, I had to ask for it for my birthday.
Yeah. Hey, question. Can we pause for a second? Are we able to pause?
You have to go to the bathroom.
I do.
I don't think we can really pause.
All right, well, hold on for just a second.
You just have to hold it, man.
No, I can't.
That's okay. I'll just keep talking like you're here, even though you're not. Do, 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 do. I have some really awesome dance moves, actually. No, but seriously. Derrick's not here, that's weird. But yeah, so the No Fear t-shirt was one. Another one was a New Kids on the Block t-shirt. I was like super jazzed to get that for Christmas one year. And so there was this sense that if you wanted something and it cost more money than an identical something, like if you wanted a shirt and it cost more money than a different shirt, then you had to ask for that shirt for Christmas or your birthday, because that's when you get special things. So if there was anything we wanted that was even a little bit expensive, we had to ask for it for Christmas or our birthday. And that's when we got presents. And that's when, you know, we got to kind of keep up with the cool kids. But I was never one of those cool kids because it was only twice a year that I got cool stuff. No. And then by the time I got into 7th grade, I was making my own money from babysitting. The deal was that if my parents had a certain amount of money they would spend on clothes. Mm-hmm. And anything that I wanted to spend over that was my responsibility. So our deal was 50-50. So if I wanted to shop at the mall instead of Walmart, Target, you know, we didn't have Target at the time, but like Walmart or the sort of discount department store, if I wanted the name brand stuff, I had to pay for half of it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just became very aware of like, okay, we don't have the financial resources that other people do. Or, I mean, now I know it's more complex than that, but
sure.
My parents were actually teaching me something called Respectability.
What parents do.
Yeah. It's a tough job.
It's ridiculous.
So anyway, I've always been pretty aware of the whole privilege thing and how it works and what it gets you. And not just that, but like what people say about that underprivileged person when they're not in the room, mm-hmm. or when their group is not represented in the room.
Yeah.
So, and I know you blogged about your token status.
Yeah. So it's really interesting hearing all of this because our stories parallel in some very interesting ways. So I like the neighborhood I was born in was like probably like 60% African American, 40% white, and pretty much all on the same socioeconomic status. When I was 9 or 10, my parents moved to a suburb of Pittsburgh, And that suburb, I always like to point out that the 2000 census said that the neighborhood that we lived in was 99% white and 1% other. So like I'm assuming that the 1% was like my house.
Yeah. You were the 1% other.
We were the 1% other. And what was interesting was like, so not only did we move to this suburb that was mostly white, it was very affluent. And like we were definitely living way above our means. So I was like definitely the poor kid. So I became aware of a couple things. So even though we lived in this white affluent suburb, we still went to church in the city. And so I was very aware of the fact that like going from home to church, we were going to very different neighborhoods.
Yep.
One of which was affluent and mostly white. A lot of money, white. And then going into the city for church, that was mostly like lower income African Americans. And so kind of feeling like I don't actually belong in either world because like I don't have the financial privilege of the folks in the community where I live.
Right.
But I'm black. And then like being in a black church, a mostly black church that had people living in some pretty rough parts of the city. So like definitely had that privilege of place compared to people that I went to church with.
Right.
So I became aware of the fact that so for me at a very young age, white and affluence kind of went together. Like I kind of saw that. I also, part of the reason that my parents chose the suburb that we moved to was it was rated as having like the best schools in the area. Yep. And so I was getting this great education, and education is definitely a huge part of privilege.
Yes.
It's huge. So one of the things that I don't think that my white friends realized was that when we went out places, we got followed because I was part of the group.
Yeah.
We got watched because I was with them. Security guards, policemen, I mean, even teachers in certain part, like we got followed a little bit more carefully because I was with them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a troublemaker. I was a good student, blah, 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 but it didn't matter because of my skin color. And I honestly don't know, like I was hyper aware of it. I was always super aware of it. And I don't know, as I've talked to friends as we've gotten older, I don't know that, like, for a lot of them, as I'm like explaining to these things now in adulthood, they're kind of like, really? I'm like, yeah, that happened. And like there were instances of like people like, cars that I'm in and the passenger seat being pulled over and people asking questions because I'm in the passenger seat. And never any like really harsh harassment, but like definitely things where it's like this was a fairly regular occurrence that like I was the common denominator of these certain things happening.
Yeah.
And that's so like I definitely became more aware of the fact, like I became hyper aware of my blackness in those circumstances, and the options there are, do I assimilate as much as possible, which like assimilating doesn't change the color of my skin,
right?
Or do I just like say fuck it and just like be as black as possible, and, like as stereotypically black as possible, and like that wasn't really me either. And I you know, I think part of it was recognizing that, you know, I think one of the things that gets lost when we talk about white privilege is the fact that black people who operate in white spaces have to be exceptional. Like they have to be like above board in terms of behavior. They have to be above board in terms of like performing in school. So I was involved in everything. Like I did sports, I did music, I did theater, not as much theater as you, but I did some theater, and I mean, it was all of this, you know. I remember having conversations with my mom in particular about the way I speak, and like, you have to sound smart. Like if you're going to be in these white spaces, you have to sound like you belong there. You have to, I mean, so my mom was the first grammar Nazi that I met. You know, of like really cracking down on making sure that I sounded like I belonged. And that was, you know, I think so often when we think about white privilege, we think about white people having more in terms of resources and access and things like that. But there's also the expectation for people of color that you have to perform at a certain level if you're going to be acceptable in white culture. And like sometimes...
And that those standards are set by white people.
Exactly. And like you have to live up to white standards, because I mean, I think part of the thing about privilege, like if I was to like make a generalization about what privilege means, it means that you get to say that who you are is the norm.
Yeah.
That like, and so being white means that you get to say that whiteness is the norm. Being male means that you get to say that being male is the norm. Being straight means that you get to say that being straight is the norm. Being Christian in this country means that you get to say that being Christian is the norm. And that there's so much privilege tied up in the representation of yourself as the norm, and not getting to see yourself as part of the norm. That's a huge burden to carry for people that, you are, I mean, anytime you deviate from what people consider to be normative, you are suddenly playing catch up. I think one of the ways that I became most aware of privilege was just, and sadly, was the church. Having so many female pastor colleagues who have to do so much more to prove their authority as a pastor, having to do so much more to claim their space as a pastor. You know, having, you know, Shannon, my partner, you know, like, there are comments made about her dress and appearance and hair and like that people would never make to me as a man. Yeah. And I've had so many of my female colleagues say, you know, say very similar things about, you know, not being taken seriously because they have youthful features, or not being taken seriously because of the way they dress, or not being taken seriously for any number of reasons, that because as a female pastor, they don't fit the congregation's norms of what a pastor should be. And that really kind of hit me as like, wow, that is so wrong. The people who have gone through the exact same training, the exact same exams, the exact same education, have to prove themselves all the more because of their gender. And I've really struggled with that, of thinking of the places when I can give voice to, or allow. I don't want to say allow, but maybe relinquish my seat so that my female colleagues have a voice. And it sucks that has to be done, but sometimes I really worry that those voices won't be heard if I don't relinquish that seat.
Yeah.
But but at the same time, I'm also very aware of the fact that I'm an African American in a I don't even remember what the last thing I read was. Like, I think the Presbyterian Church USA is like 91% white. And like, 9% other.
9% other?
Yeah, like there I am again.
Hi, I'm other.
Really, really like enjoying my other status. But it's
other didn't mean bad.
Yeah, right. I mean, that like not part of the majority is not a bad thing. And walking into those places of going on the floor for examination for my ordination of again feeling like I have to be more eloquent. I have to be more theologically astute than my white colleagues do, who might just kind of like get a pass on certain things.
Yeah, it's exhausting to constantly feel like you have to prove yourself.
Absolutely.
And it's exhausting and it's stressful.
Yes.
And I feel like that's really, that's the piece that I think is only starting to be talked about, is like the vicarious trauma that happens when someone who looks like you is killed for looking like you.
Yeah.
For no other reason.
Absolutely.
It's at that point that it's like, oh, that could be me, that is me. And then it's like this sort of vicarious trauma of that moment.
And the light that's being shown on the fact that no amount of respectability makes you immune from that.
Yeah.
I think, the fact that, very successful professional African American in a nice car will get pulled over because they're African American. And it doesn't matter that they have multiple degrees. It doesn't matter that they've been successful in their field. It doesn't matter that they have played by the rules for X number of years.
It doesn't matter that they're a congressman.
It doesn't matter that they're a congressman. I mean, it doesn't matter that they're Republican congressmen.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's, yeah. It's like there's no. And honestly, like I look at the president and I'm like, there is no level of achievement in this country that makes you immune from that scrutiny.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that makes it exhausting. There's no level of achievement. And I look at the current presidential race and I look at Hillary and I'm like, there is no level of achievement. There is no level of being a successfully outspoken lawyer and law student and first lady and successful senator that makes her immune from the fact that she is a woman and she has to go through the scrutiny that women go through.
Yep. Yes, and also this idea that like, I think about gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that somehow by doing marriage differently, you are tarnishing it.
Yeah.
Or it's not real.
Yeah.
Like, marriage between two women isn't real marriage. It's like, real to who?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's this crazy sort of mold of what is real, what is true, what is right. It's like, what if things were right based on sort of the way it feels more than the way it looks.
Right.
Like, it's very easy to know what feels bad and what feels good.
Yeah.
Hating another person, being angry, doesn't feel good.
It really doesn't.
So stop. Like, it's really that simple.
Be angry.
I mean, you know, I get that a lot of people get a lot of energy and a lot of motivation from anger. And like, that's not how I want to connect with people.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And it's like, I just don't, it really boggles my mind the way that just this thing that has happened in our culture where there's one right way, and it's usually the white way, and everyone else is inferior.
Yep.
Like every like, this is the mold, and if you don't fit the mold, you're inferior.
Yes.
Not different. Inferior.
Yeah.
And it's just like, maybe I'm too humble. I don't know. I just don't. I can't do that. I can't live that way. I can't embody that. And it's like, along with privilege, and I think this is where sort of some of the defensiveness about privilege comes in, is guilt.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people who have privilege didn't ask for it.
Right.
It just is. And then there are the people who have economic privilege who have worked really hard to be financially set.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, how do you responsibly, ethically, morally handle your privilege, whether it was earned or bestowed?
Right. And I think there has to be, I think there has to be an understanding on those of us who do have some level of privilege that what is being asked by those who point out your privilege is not that you feel guilty. It's that you acknowledge it. It's that you recognize it and that you use it responsibly, and that because you can't, like, I can't get rid of my male privilege. Like, it's not going anywhere. Like, I can't, like, I can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So how do I use it responsibly? How do I use it in a way that allows space for non-male voices to be heard? The thing that also, and I want to make sure that we talk about this too, is the like victimization that people seem to feel by the sense that they're losing privilege. Like, all of a sudden we have like men's right activists, and we have people who want to have straight pride parades. And why don't we have a White History Month? And it's like, well, first off, every month is White History Month.
Every day.
Every day we have some sort of celebration of white history. A straight pride parade is like anytime that someone of two people of opposite sex get to walk down the street hand in hand.
Yep.
And like we don't actually need men's rights activists, because no one's actually taking any rights away from men by saying that women are equal.
Yep.
And again, like, as you know, I don't even want to like shine a light on this right now, but as we're kind of in the midst of the Republican National Convention, like, a lot of these voices are coming to the surface, and a lot of these, like when when you hear the Republican nominee say that he wants to make America great again, he's talking about making America great again for those who have historically had privilege.
Yeah.
And it's not that they've lost any of their privilege. It's just that other people are saying we matter too.
Yep.
And it's the victimization that comes with the challenge of privilege that I really feel is really threatening to progress and kind of it's kind of infuriating.
Yeah, well, I mean, and honestly, we live in a culture of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this survival of the fittest kind of mentality where it's like, if you can make the money, you deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but if it's not universally accepted that I deserve to be here, I'm not going to make the money.
Right.
Because if it's not universally accepted that I deserve to be here, no one's going to hire me for anything.
Yep.
You know? And that is what's really scary to me, because I am a person, so I feel like I have a kind of unique perspective on privilege, because I am a same gender loving woman who passes for straight.
Sure.
So like there are transgender people who pass, meaning that nobody really knows that they're transgender. There are LGBT people of all kinds who pass for what is heteronormative. And it's only once we come out to whomever we're talking to that we suddenly become the other.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times I've watched that happen on someone's face. Where they say, oh, your husband. And I'm like, actually, she's my wife.
Right.
And they're like,
oh.
Yeah, there's the oh. And then there's the oh. There's a difference.
Right. Like, oh.
And you don't have to experience harassment to experience hostility.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there are degrees. And someone can be hostile toward you without harassing you.
Yeah.
And hostility sucks.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, I'm pretty sure we learned like in kindergarten how to share. Somewhere along the line, that gets forgotten.
Yeah.
When we're in competition with each other for resources, and the message is drilled into us over and over and over again that we have to fight and work and grind it out to get our little slice of the pie.
Yeah.
And I don't buy into that. That is something that we create for ourselves. It's
absolutely
not a necessity.
And I think, I think you're really hitting on something here, is that like a lot of the ways that we can deal with privilege is by getting out of this mentality of scarcity, is by actually living with a mentality of abundance, that there really is enough access, there's enough opportunity for everyone, that like we don't have to hoard the opportunities in our privileged cohort.
Yep.
And I think that, I mean, honestly, that just feels like a healthier way to live.
Yes.
That like we're not running out of resources.
Yep. There's plenty to go around.
Yeah. Yeah.
There really is. And it's a trap to think that there isn't.
Yeah.
Trap, and it's an act of the faithless, in my opinion. Scarcity is the opposite of faith to me.
Absolutely.
That if I really have, and this is kind of sounding prosperity gospel, so please stop me, but like I feel like you know, there is a physical manifestation of God.
Yeah.
And if we allow that physical manifestation to happen and to move through our physical beings and bodies, then there really is enough.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are people who value their own having more over other people having enough.
Right. Right.
Like, do you really need that $7 billion? I mean,
I don't need $1 billion. I really don't.
You know, do you need 10,000 square feet for 2 people? Like, 10,000 square feet could go a long way to house a lot of people who don't otherwise have homes. And it's not that they don't have homes because they don't work hard.
Right.
They don't have homes because they are being held to an impossible standard because of the color of their skin, because of their sexual orientation, because.
Yeah.
Now, are there welfare queens? Probably. Like, there are always going to be people who take advantage of any generosity, but that is a symptom of the same sickness to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not respecting what your fair share really is.
Yeah.
It's greed on the opposite side.
Yeah.
And to me, greed feeds the racial, economic disparity in this country.
Absolutely.
It feeds the privilege machine.
Yes.
Because greed says that the more money you make, the more value you have.
Yep.
And the more superior you are.
Yeah.
And that is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
We can't exist without each other.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we as spiritual people and as faith leaders have to recognize is that the church is not immune from this. And we definitely need to talk about the fact that Christians have a privileged place in our culture.
Yes, absolutely.
And that so many
certain kinds of Christians
absolutely
seem to have more privilege than others. Because again, we get back to that who's a real Christian question. And it's like, okay, if I engage the Bible and other texts to inform my faith, suddenly I'm not a real Christian.
Nope.
If I'm a same gender loving person, suddenly I'm not a real Christian.
Yep.
I was home and a friend told me that that they weren't going to ask me to officiate their wedding because I wasn't a real minister because I'm a woman. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
no, that's not actually how that works.
Yeah. I'm like, pretty sure I do ministry work every single day.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's all that's required to be a minister.
Yeah.
Do the work, right?
Yeah, do the work. And I think that's we have to be really careful. And again, I mean, I hate this because like the rhetoric coming out of the RNC is so forefront of my mind this week. But when we say that a certain kind of Christianity is the real kind of Christianity, and when we say that Christianity over and against Islam or over and against Judaism is the preferred manifestation of religiosity, then like we are making the world hostile. And I think your use of the word hostility there is spot on. Like we are making the world hostile for a lot of people. I have there's a woman that I follow on Facebook, and I heard her speak here in Baltimore. She's a Muslim scholar, brilliant woman, and she she shares about the fear that her children have about Trump winning the presidency. And I'm like, there is an awareness even at the young age that her children are, that like there is hostility coming out of a part of our country that is making her children feel unsafe, and that's not okay. That's not okay. And so I feel like we as Christians have to say that like part of owning and laying down our privilege is making room for those voices from other faiths, people of goodwill who want to contribute, who have contributed to our society. And like I don't know, like it's heartbreaking for me to read those sorts of things about like kids being worried that they're going to be shipped out of the country if a certain candidate wins the presidency. Like that's a hostility that no one should have to live with.
Yeah, I had a friend who posted a picture of her grandson who she's white and he's one of his parents was Mexican. And, he said, Grandma, Trump can't win because then he'll send me away. It's like,
yeah, like that's an awful thing for anyone to have.
How do you go from like manifest destiny to deport American citizens who aren't white?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Kids who were born here.
The tired, poor, huddled masses thing is kind of out the window. And I worry that I think so often in the church we look at like the declining numbers of individual congregations and see again that scarcity that is within Christianity instead of seeing the abundance that we have to offer.
Yes.
Instead of seeing our historical place of privilege and actually seeing the gift that it is for us to make room for multiple expressions of faith, for multiple expressions of spirituality, and really
multiple expressions of God.
Multiple expressions of God.
Like, and multiple experiences of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm a disciple. Like, I'm Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. And if there's one thing we believe more than anything else, it is that your relationship with God is personal and individual to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your responsibility to educate yourself and to continue to study and meditate and pray and develop that relationship.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think about, wow, what would happen if, like, how different our culture could be if there was this real understanding of, okay, your experience is your experience. And it is my responsibility to listen to and witness that experience.
Yeah.
Not to make it wrong, not to make it inferior, not to do anything with it other than to witness and to notice and to give testimony, give testament to that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been talking for a little over an hour, and I want to ask kind of a wrapping up question.
Yes.
And it's a two-part question. How do we do, because we always want to come back to this, how do we do self-care both in those places where we are recognizing our own privilege and in those places where we are recognizing our own lack of privilege?
Yes. So for me, my biggest privilege is that I'm white. And I have a lot of white guilt, like a lot, that I've been working with, playing with, healing. I've done a lot of genealogy work. My people owned slaves. It's a fact. That is in my genetic history, that is in my ancestry. And so for me, it's like, it doesn't help anybody for me to feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't help anybody.
Nope.
Being aware of my privilege is different from feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
And feeling bad about it, again, isn't going to help anybody. So self-care in the midst of having privilege, for me, means being able to hold the complexity of that and the contradiction of that. Because yes, I may be white and I'm same gender loving. And in many places that is not acceptable. You know, that when I get off the airplane in a new airport, we have to read the room before my wife and I hold hands.
Yeah.
You know, these are just, and being a woman, like and being two women together, like if a woman makes 75, 78 cents to every man's dollar and there are two women in the relationship, that's $1.50 an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
That's $1.50 together that we're not making.
Right.
That two men together would be making. Okay, let's just start there. So, you know, I think for me, it's about managing guilt. And then on the level of places where I am not privileged, managing resentment is really, I think resentment is really the biggest thing, because I could very easily match hate with hate and match intolerance with intolerance. And I am called to embody love to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And that means that when I start to feel frustrated and I start to resent our world and our culture and people who are more privileged, that is a very clear signal to me that I have some work to do. That I have some spiritual practice to do around clearing that out and regrounding from a place of love.
Yeah.
And, you know, nothing triggers that resentment faster than sexist or homophobic experiences in the church and in religious settings, because I have dedicated my life to creating sanctuary for other people.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee that the space I create is safe, because I don't know what's safe for anybody else. I can guarantee that that I will be an affirming presence in that space.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like witnessing the experiences of people who have less privilege than me and really like acknowledging that that's their reality. So my biggest advice, I guess, or message to people who have privilege, who may be interacting with people of equal or lower privilege, to listen. To listen. Don't try to change it. Don't try to interpret it. Don't project. Please don't project onto me or whomever. It's like the worst thing you can do as a more privileged person is negate privilege.
Absolutely.
Is deny that privilege exists.
Yeah.
And to somehow like, you can be privileged and still have stress and still struggle. Like, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And like, I think the piece for me that gets really off balance is it's like, because I have white privilege, my struggle in the world is less valid than someone who doesn't have white privilege.
Right.
And it's like, that's the same hierarchical thinking that created privilege in the first place.
Yep.
You know, so it's kind of an unhinging of the mind and like really like opening it up and going, okay, how am I contributing to the perpetuation of this system, this reality that I really don't agree with?
Yeah.
And what's a different choice? What are my other options? To me, that is the fundamental question.
Yeah.
what would your response be to that question that you posed?
So I would say totally agree on in those places where I'm privileged. It's my responsibility, and this is really the key thing. In the places where I'm privileged, it is my responsibility to educate myself.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the responsibility of people who have less privilege to educate me about their experience.
Yep.
It is my responsibility to educate myself.
Yes.
And that is part of self-care, is to do the work of educating myself.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. I think for those places where I'm not privileged, a couple things. One, I 100% agree with the resentment piece, that like you have to be able to manage your anger and to be able to focus it into some positive and productive avenues. Like you have to be able to put it into whether you call it activism or not, you have to be able to put it into some sort of productive avenues that are going to actually work towards making things better. But I also think it's really important in those places where we're not feeling privileged to not play oppression Olympics. Like it's not worthwhile for me to say that, like, well, okay, I get 1 point for being a man, but I lose a point for being black, but I get a point for being like that. Like we have to like kind of have some fluidity about. Let's have conversations about one thing at a time, and let's have conversations in a way where we're all recognizing that we have levels of privilege, levels where we're not as privileged, and working towards that place of abundance for all of us. Because it really does no good to say like my oppression is worse than your oppression.
Yep.
Like all that does is build the hostility, and actually I feel like it just kind of creates a divide and conquer situation for those who are at the very top of kind of the privilege ladder. So
yeah,
that's how I would answer that.
Mm-hmm. And just on the level of oppression, it's like when the only commonality that groups have is oppression, a shared oppression,
mm-hmm.
That is not enough to unify those groups.
Truth.
It's not.
Yeah.
And so then the question becomes, okay, if the only thing I have with another person is that we are both oppressed groups of people,
yeah,
how can I connect on a human level with that person?
Absolutely.
Like people don't realize that there's a lot of sexism in the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
That two men together and two women together have very little in common except their shared oppression.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
yeah.
Because like gay men and straight women can talk about dating guys, and lesbian women and straight men can talk about dating women, and like obviously there are a few things that cross over, but it's not a given that just because two people are gay, they're going to like each other.
Right. Absolutely.
Or just because two people are African-American doesn't mean they're going to like each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that when my friends are like, oh, I have gay friends. I would be happy to introduce you. I'm like,
you'll get along because you're gay.
Yeah,
exactly. Talk about gay stuff.
I'm like, but I said, I'm happy. I always say, I'm happy to meet your friends, and I reserve the right to not like them.
Yes, absolutely.
Those are my conditions.
Yeah. So what are you working on these days? What do you want to?
I got a new spiritual direction client today.
Excellent.
Yes, and continuing with the people that I've been working with who are really really like making some amazing strides, and just really living into their own sense of self and self-worth in really like ways that really impress me. So I'm super just glad and happy and excited about all of that. And I have a performance coming up in September. We're still trying to find a space. So I'm not exactly sure what the dates and times are going to be, but probably September 8th, 9th, 10th, something like that. And then of course, Drinks with Amy. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah. How about you?
I would just point people to my blog, derrickweston.com. I'm doing a lot of writing these days, so.
And every time you post something, post it to Drinks with Amy.
I will do that. Absolutely.
Because that'd be awesome.
Right. Yeah, I will do.
One last question.
Yeah.
As a white person, being me, if there's one book that I should read to educate myself about being not white, do you have a recommendation?
The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. Start there.
Okay.
Classic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Yay! Well, we will be back in 2 weeks.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.